Online, people have always asked, why are Chinese swords designed the way they are? Especially the Chinese jian. Its guard is quite small, and you would think that for a thrusting weapon, unlike European swords, the guard has always been on the small side. European swords have evolved to have a very heavy or elaborate protection for the hand in their guards, and how come Chinese swords has never been the same way? In this video, I'll answer this question, and I believe there really hasn't been any videos online explaining the reason why the sword is the way they are. And the answer really is simply, it has to do with how the sword is handled. So the guard design and its technique cannot be separated, right? But there hasn't really been any videos or people explaining it from a pure mechanical point of view about why that is. And here I'll explain how the sword should be handled. And so this is what works for me and the way I prefer it. So these are some of the criteria I look at the sword guard when I select it. And for me as well, the mechanical reasons why I do what I do. Let's start with this one. I bought this 15, 20 years ago. It's been a very long time. Back then, this really is the only non-bending, solid, Chinese jian that you can buy out there. And I bought this a really long time ago. It's not the prettiest sword, and I haven't really been taking care of it over the years, so there's a bit of rust on it. I use it more as a practice sword. It is all spring steel, but it's not super heavy, but nor is super light. It's about 1.3 pounds. So this is the first sword I ever had, and this guard design of this very sort of characteristic reverse triangle shape, where the triangle opens towards the tip, right? And you have a flaring of these two sort of protrusions, and you have sort of a triangular guard towards the handle, and the handle kind of here starts to narrow. And then you have a characteristic pommel right here. So this sort of design is a very classic post-Qing Dynasty, early Republican, or you can say during entire Republican era design, and towards the beginning of the People's Republic of China. So after 1949, 1950s, this sort of design became sort of the mainstay of when you start going and start searching for Chinese sword or jian on Chinese internet, if you on Taobao, you will start finding these. And they use this kind of guard a lot in modern wushu. So this is sort of what you see, and this is sort of, the guard that Chinese martial art practitioners will be introduced to when they start to practice the sword. And so this is sort of the earliest thing that everyone's exposed to. The way you hold it is essentially, you don't actually, a lot of people say, okay, well, the sword should be held with your hand here right underneath the guard. And this is a lot of people do it. However, when you do it this way, you're not taking advantage of this particular triangular design. So this is the Little Raven Studio's wooden sparring sword. The owner of the studio essentially crafts this thing by hand, and it's, it has very nice wood and very nice finish. It's quite comfortable. I highly recommend it if you have a chance to get one. So you can see this guard essentially is a blown up version of sort of that particular Republican era or Chinese or modern era guard design. This is more similar to the older style, I would say, early Qing Dynasty and the Ming Dynasty size of such a guard. So I personally prefer a reverse triangle design of this shape. The reasoning is because in Chinese swords, you have essentially a very important characteristic technique. Essentially, you want to have a reverse rise of the back edge for both defense and offense. And then you want to have a striking motion. So a striking motion is not a cut where you rotate across the hip and have a rotational curvature of the blade to cut. Instead, a strike is more of a shearing motion, where the sword, beginning from a more diagonal position, and it strikes out like this. It strikes out, you see how the tip comes towards the opponent and come back. So this is really what this guard is designed to do. And because it's a double-edged sword, you want to use both sides. Essentially, that's the idea. When I have my sword down underneath me and I want to pull it up for that particular technique. So the pull-up technique is called beng. If you do it very forcefully, it's called beng jian. When you want to do it this way, the idea is to do it quite fast. And you want to do it in such a way that the sword is not going to hit yourself in the head. It's not going to cut yourself in the shoulder, because being double-edged, you have to be very careful. So the idea is you really want to slow it down. So you want to be able to do it fast, but at the same time, decelerate the blade. And so it never touches you and get close to your body. So when you do something like this, essentially you want to be able to do it and have the blade stop vertically in front of you. In practice, this will happen a lot. So you can just sort of do that. When you do practice, you can get quite fast with this particular technique. And once you came out on this technique, or the blade is coming in near its vertical position, then you want to be able to also, right, strike out as fast as you can. And that is sort of what that guard is designed to do. So there comes sort of a design of the sword that is a 3-point contact. What I mean is this, is that if you do it here, it's completely in the wrist, right? It's purely in the wrist. When you're coming vertical, you notice that you can't do it, right? Because what happened is that your wrist can only come so far. Everything comes down in the wrist and all the force squeeze into the wrist. But so if you want to come and make it more vertical, you notice that what you need to do, you need to let go of your last two fingers, your pinky and your other finger. So when this happens, you'll get into a situation where these two fingers start to let go and become lighter. And then when you want to strike out with it, you want to sort of collapse them here. So the hand essentially forms a shearing leverage force on the handle to allow it to go forward faster. So when you do this, and so in Wudang sword hand, what they always tell you that is that when you hold the sword is these two fingers, that's more important. And the rest of the fingers, your index, your pinky, is not really that important. And this is the reason, right? Because what you need is you actually need to use your last two fingers to participate in the leverage control on the handle when it comes towards your vertical. So you can actually strike forward more. But what people often forget is that actually if you put your hand up a little bit more, what you notice is that as you put your sword back, this particular curvature on the back will now squeeze towards the opening of the jaw in your hand. And this actually will stop the sword very nicely. And it works in conjunction with the other two fingers at the very end of it. Right? It works in conjunction with the other two fingers at the end to stop the sword solid. Of course, there's other techniques involved as well, but I'm not going to get into it in this particular video. Maybe there will be another video I can talk about the details of how to do it exactly, because it's quite involved in terms of technique. But the basic idea really is that when I pull my sword back and slow it down, right, I have a 2-point leverage. One is at the jaw of my hand, and 2 is towards the last two fingers of my palm. So this allows me to slow it down. Now, when I need to strike out with it, I can, this finger, right, these fingers can pull in. But what's important is I now need to control the striking path. And I can do that. I can slow it down, or I can control it better when I have my index finger on the other side of it. All right, so when these fingers come in, pull, the other side now sits on my index. So this allows, so you can see that the sword has a 3-point contact design, where the contact themselves is in a triangular shape, right? And guess what? The handle is triangular. So this is essentially what you want to do when you have to have good sword control. So this sword control is exactly designed for a vertical rotation or tilted vertical rotation of the sword with the hand control. And that's the basics of the mechanics of why it's designed that way. There are 3 categorically vertical positions when the guard ends up this way. One is when it's in front of you, right? When the guard is now in a vertical position in front of you. Second is when you rotate internally, right? The sword now ends up in a vertical position where it sits towards my left. So you can see now the sword actually is also vertical. In this case, what's important a lot of times is that you want a sword to be able to have a ability to resist a vertical press on this direction. And check it out. If you do it this way, the guard now presses into the jaw of my hand, and yeah, I have that resistance, right? And if I need to reverse the cut path here, I am able to do so as well with the last two fingers, as well as a leverage in the jaw of my hand, right? So this is one of more important ways to do it. And second vertical position, or the third one, vertical position, is right here. So when my sword comes out in this position on my right, again, the guard is now vertical on the ground. Similarly, right, I want to resist downward pressure this direction. In this case, same thing. It sits in the jaw of my hand. As well, it guards with my last two fingers. This way, if I need to come in and rotate this way, the path is very clear, right? For the exact same reason. And similarly, so the sword essentially have three vertical positions, and these are the three positions: the mid, the left, and the right control. That oftentimes you got to think about. They can also sit in a upwards position, but generally Chinese sword is not. We don't concern with that position as much. But these are the key differences, I think, with other way to handle a blade, a double-bladed weapon that is unique, I believe, to the Chinese system. And this means that in all these positions, I need to have a symmetrical guard. And if I start to have a guard that's quite asymmetric, covers my hand, you know what? It's not comfortable, and I can't use it this way. That's essentially covered the basics of the leverage and why the design is like this and never really got bigger. So this is a basic overview of how the sword is held. I hope this is helpful for you. Thanks for watching.